And then last, but kind of not least, I have a very strange one. Guys, I don't know what to make of this yet. We're going to have to talk about this at length, and I don't have time to talk about it at length right now. This is Texas versus United States of America, with California intervening, and it goes something like this. The United States healthcare system touches millions of lives in a daily and deeply personal way. Health insurance policy is therefore a politically charged affair, inflaming emotions and testing civility. But Article 3 courts, which is courts that are created under Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the Supreme Court has confirmed are not tasked with, nor are they suited to, policy making. Instead, courts resolve discrete cases and controversies, and sometimes a court must determine whether the Constitution grants Congress the power it asserts, and what results if it does not. If a party shows that a policymaker exceeded the authority granted to it by the Constitution, the fruit of that unauthorized action cannot stand. The Latin phrase for this is ultra vires. You've exceeded the limits of your authority or limits of your power. Here, plaintiffs allege that following the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, the individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, is unconstitutional. They say it is no longer fairly readable as an exercise of Congress's tax power and continues to be unsustainable under the Interstate Commerce Clause. They further urge that, if they are correct, the balance of the ACA is untenable and inseverable from the invalid mandate. Resolution of these claims rests at the intersection of the ACA, the Supreme Court's decision in NFIB, and the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The NFIB is the National Federation of Independent Businesses versus Sibelius, noting the wisdom of legislative policy being entrusted to the nation's elected leaders. We'll have to go over that case some other time and in much more depth. I think I know what's going on here, though, and I can explain this too. But I'll get there in a moment. In NFIB, the Supreme Court held that the individual mandate was unconstitutional under the Interstate Commerce Clause, but could fairly be read as an exercise of Congress's tax power because it triggered a tax. The TCJA eliminated that tax. The Supreme Court's reasoning in NFIB, buttressed by other binding precedent and plain text, thus compels the conclusion that the individual mandate may no longer be upheld under the tax power. And because the individual mandate continues to mandate the purchase of health insurance, it remains unsustainable under the Interstate Commerce Clause, as the Supreme Court already held. Finally, Congress stated many, many times, unequivocally, through enacted text signed by the president, that the individual mandate is essential to the ACA. And this essentiality, the ACA's text makes clear, means the mandate must work together with other provisions for the act to function as intended. All 9 justices to review the ACA acknowledged this text and Congress's manifest intent to establish the individual mandate as the ACA's essential provision. The current and previous administrations have recognized that too. Because rewriting the ACA without its essential feature is beyond the power of an Article 3 court, the court thus adheres to Congress's textually expressed intent and binding Supreme Court precedent to find the individual mandate is inseverable from the ACA's remaining provisions. Construing the plaintiff's application for preliminary injunction as a motion for partial summary judgment, the court therefore denies plaintiff's request for an injunction, but grants summary judgment on count 1 of the amended complaint. What does this mean? This means that a judge declared Obamacare invalid, unconstitutional, done. Let that sink in for a second. Done. Now, I have something to say about this, and I don't know that you're going to like it, so please sit down. Please put your finger on that dislike button if you want. I think the judge is right. The federal government gets its power from certain places enumerated in the Constitution. We are a federated or a federation of consenting states. Now, they have consented in the permanent sense, and we had a whole civil war over whether or not states could revoke that consent. So that's not up for grabs right now. That's not up for discussion. However, do have a separation of powers, and a clear line is drawn between what powers the federal government have over the people directly, and what powers are left to the states, and then what powers are left to the people. And short of getting into a very long discussion about constitutional law and how this works, we're going to try and have a short one. So the federal government created the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, called Obamacare, by its detractors, and now, it's had some success. So, sort of like the Big Bang Theory, whatever. So Obamacare, or the ACA, was enacted by legislative action, bicameralism and presentment, signed by the president, passed by both houses, made it law. Well, that doesn't mean that they couldn't make an illegal law. Certainly Congress has passed bad laws before that had to be either invalidated or modified by a court. And what does the courts do? The court's enumerated powers are to check, are to validate, are to make sure that the governments are following the law, including its own system, including the courts themselves too. Various courts can, an appeals court has a check on a lower court, and a Supreme Court has a check on an appeals court. And the Supreme Court is the final court, hence the phrase, we are not final because we're infallible, we're infallible because we are final. The phrasing is weird, but what it means is we are the last court, so it doesn't matter whether we are right or wrong in that sense. It matters whether we're right or wrong in the we're final sense, but you don't call us fallible or infallible. We're just final. So we have all these checks and balances in place. And some of those checks are that the court has to make sure the Constitution and the law work together. And that's what the court is saying here, that the Congress enacted the law as a exercise of the Interstate Commerce Clause. Well, the Interstate Commerce Clause allows the federal government nearly unlimited power, and this is a bit of history here. It's been going on for the past 80 or 100 years. There's been a shift from states' rights to federal government rights over interstate commerce, because the Interstate Commerce Clause, which has been there since the beginning, hasn't been used this way until about 80 or so years ago. And the federal government says that basically anything that crosses state lines or can cross state lines touches interstate commerce, meaning the federal government can regulate it. So guns, for example, typically left to the states, now are regulated by the federal government because they touch interstate commerce. Well, the federal government enacted a not single payer, health care for all plan. Well, healthcare exchanges work on state laws, and healthcare and public safety and all that are generally relegated to state control. So how could the federal government tell the states, you have to follow the ACA rules on healthcare in your state? Well, they had to make the argument that it is an exercise of interstate power. Well, that got challenged. I'm guessing, I haven't read the case, but in NFIB that we just saw from this court, I'm guessing that got challenged there. And the government made the argument that, well, if it's not interstate commerce, at least it's a tax. And we have the ability to tax, so we're going to call it a tax. And the fact that you get a penalty, a tax penalty, if you don't have it, that's a tax enough. Fine. Well, President Trump and the Congress under him, I believe it was, passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I don't believe it was can anybody confirm it was not the former administration? They passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of, I think, last year, 2017. And one of the things it did was eliminate that tax, the individual mandate tax. So now, how in the world does the federal government have jurisdiction over state healthcare markets if they are no longer interstate commerce and they are no longer a tax? They don't. You have to find some other argument. Now, this will be appealed, and I'm sure we'll hear what those other arguments are, and Congress will have a chance to vote. And this doesn't necessarily mean that state healthcare exchanges are going to go away. I actually haven't received and don't expect to receive a notice from my health insurance company that what I just signed up for is now invalid. So I don't actually think that this means your health insurance is gone. However, you should start planning for that. And I'm not kidding. You should be planning for the pre-existing condition exemption to go away. And you should be planning for your health care plan to change. Now, how do you plan for something you don't know? You have to just start planning, whatever. Put a little bit extra money away or something is probably a good idea. And call your congressman, call your congress people, let them know that it's extremely important that people have health care. I mean, I'm talking from, like, look at me, I'm self-employed. I receive healthcare through the healthcare.gov, marketplace and all that. I pay for it, but I that's how I get it. So if they're taking away whatever regulations and controls there were there, what does that mean? I don't know. So we all have to figure this out together. Why should we have to do that? Couldn't we just please, for once and for all, have some kind of centralized health thing like every other civilized country has? I don't even mean to. It doesn't even matter which side of the freaking aisle you're on, politically speaking. People need to be healthy in order to work and contribute to the damn economy. Anyway.
I've just signed up, of course. I don't mind sharing.
Proud of you.
That
very, very proud of you for that.
Signed up on healthcare.gov as well.
Anyone's thoughts on that? What do people think about, some of you have government mandated universal health care. Do you find it to be good or bad, or what are your complaints or not complaints? I'm happy to hear these things now and in the comments below.
I mean, for me, like, having a government healthcare is, like, brilliant. Like, I don't have to worry about getting ill. I can just walk into my doctor, make an appointment, or walk into a hospital and get treatment without having to worry if I can pay for it. Like, for example, about this a few months ago, obviously I got slightly assaulted at work and got sent to the hospital. Now, if I had to pay for that and to find out if my hand was actually broken or not, I probably would not have went because I could not afford it. And who knows, maybe something was indeed wrong and I could have just disadvantaged myself in the long term by not getting it checked out. But just having that security that I can just walk there, get an x-ray, and they can say, well, you sprained your arm in 3 places, nothing is broken, you're gonna be fine. It's just a great peace of mind to know that I can get back to work and not have to worry about my healthcare.
And you didn't have to sue your employer for workers' compensation. And although the people who hurt you definitely were guilty of some kind of criminal offense, you also didn't have to sue them for your medical costs either. So you've literally eliminated 2 or more lawsuits by providing health coverage. 2 or more lawsuits for every single injury by providing universal health care. That's one benefit right there.
For me, because I've had lifelong issues with like disability and stuff, that the successes that I've had in my life, being able to go like all the way studying through my PhD, I credit a lot of that to a socialized healthcare system because, my family would never have been able to afford the medical costs for treating me, especially for not life-threatening things that were chronic, that in the US, it just wouldn't, it would have ruined my family, or I would have had no option in terms of going to school. And instead, the government has said, through its policies, it has said, we know that you have medical issues, but we don't, we want you to be part of society. We want you to have a job. We want you to be successful. And so we're going to provide the tools for you to be able to get treatment and accommodations so that you can participate in society like everybody else. And I I mean, I take a lot of that for granted, but thinking about if I had been born in a different country, how that would not have been my experience.
Yeah.
Merideer would like to know what the intervention by California means.
California tried to argue for the ACA. I don't have the details on that. California was obviously not successful. I will cover more of it. I think I am going to publish this alone, but we are obviously going to have to talk way more. This thing is another 50 pages long, and I'm sure that it explains lots of interesting things about jurisdiction and the powers of the federal government. And actually, that should be very, very interesting. But for right now, I wanted to get something out there to help explain the headlines when you see that a federal judge declared the ACA unconstitutional. I agree. It may very well be so. Now, what I don't know, here's the thing, like when you're trained in a profession, you're supposed to also know the things you don't know. What we don't know, I have not researched what Congress's intent was. Is it possible the judge is wrong about Congress's intent, that the individual mandate was essential? Yes, I doubt it. I doubt that the judge is wrong. The judge has researchers, clerks doing things for them. They're very good. They don't get hired unless they're very good. I don't doubt that they did their job. Is this an activist judge? I don't think so, but I would need to read the opinion and form a judgment for myself. I, at this time, don't see anything in here that says to me, that screams to me, this judge is just doing this because they're a lifetime judge and can not like the other judge can write a snarky letter. This doesn't seem to be a snarky letter. That seemed to be actually kind of like, we know you're not going to like this, so here's the basis for it. Let's go, buckle up. That seemed to be more what it was written in that sort of language. So I'm sorry I'm laughing. It's amusing, but it's also scary because I have literal friends that Obamacare saved their life because they were not able to get health care without it. And with healthcare, they were able to get a transplant. Lives were saved. I mean, I've like literally seen my friend's life saved by healthcare that didn't block her pre-existing condition. So this is very important. People will die if we aren't able to save the American healthcare system or vastly improve it. And let me be clear here. I don't care if President Trump and the current administration sit down tomorrow and make a new healthcare plan that fixes all of this. They got all my support for that. That doesn't mean I'm voting for them, but they got all my support for that part right there. I have nothing. There's no political anything here. We need health care to keep people alive and get people into a condition, keep people stable in a condition that they can work and contribute to the economy and pay taxes and be happy. Because frankly, that's when people are committing the least crime and paying the most money for things and want to explore the world and participate in society and have a good time. And this is good for everybody. This is good even for people who would otherwise want to be, at a higher income or higher wealth than everybody else. This doesn't affect that. They still get to do that. I don't understand why there's even a question about this in our country, but whatever. I could rant for a long time about this and I don't have time. I've got to go live my life like you should be. So that's obviously a really charged opinion, and I expect it to be appealed. I expect this to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. It'll probably take a year or two. I have no idea what is going to happen to the ACA in between time, so write your congressman is really the best thing I can tell you right now. And by congressmen, I mean congresspeople. Write your congresspeople. I think that's the best thing you can do right now. All right, everybody, that's our show. I'm going to go pack for my trip and drop the dogs off at my parents', and I'll see you guys from Scotland. So have a great Sunday, a great week. I'm sure that I'll see you in a special live stream sometime Monday or Tuesday when I get my portable equipment set up. Thank you very much to our Patreon supporters. Thank you to Justin Rogers, who has sponsored us at the $500 level. Really appreciate all your support there. Thank you very much to Jonathan Doe, Jonathan Steele, Gavin Barnard, Kyle Mudrak, Eevi, Andy, Verement, Tayne, William Gonzalez, Michael Pearce, Terry Crisp, Richard Fournier, Breakfast Demon, Spirit Bear, Jan Negrey, JAXMerrick, and Daniel Perez for your support in December at the $50 level. And thank you to all of the named $5 plus supporters at the that are on the LED panel behind me, and I'll put a crawl or something on the screen for you. And I believe there's a total of over 400 of you Patreon supporters supporting us on patreon.com. So this week we'll have some short videos with those two that we just did, plus I'll be making some new things for you. And we'll have an update on the Lawyer Simulator trademark as well, which was denied. And I'll explain what happens next and what we're going to do there. So anyway, love you guys. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, and I will see you later. Bye. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Hello. Hello, I can get down here and grab your ball. And you know what we'll do? We can at least throw the ball to you. Little throws like that. Oh, hello. Being attacked by a golden retriever. Attacked by a golden retriever, huh? You missed that one, Ilsa. Hello. Hello. Hello, my golden retriever boy.